اوكي شيخ تفضل ان شاء الله تعالى.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم إنا نحمدك على نعمك العظيمة وآلائك الجسيمة ونصلي ونسلم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. Once again, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bless us in this endeavor of seeking knowledge. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما. Ya Allah, teach us that which is beneficial for us and bless us in the knowledge you have granted us and increase our knowledge. Today I have a very important personality. It is none other than Malcolm X, Al-Hajj Malik Shabazz, who is the icon of Islam in America and a thinker, a leader, organizer, and excellent orator. Before I begin, I would urge myself and everyone in the audience to pray for our brothers and sisters in Gaza and other places where they are oppressed. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless them, honor them to gain their freedom and dignity and the rights that Allah has bestowed on them. Now, coming back to our discussion, inshallah, I have this basic outline as usual: origins and milieu in the nation of Islam, transformations, the Quran and the Prophet, the influence of the Quran and the Prophet of Islam sallallahu alaihi wasallam on this great personality, and then I will go to some of the testimonials of Malcolm X, and finally I will give you some taste of the wisdom that this great leader and thinker and reformer has left us. Malcolm X was one of the greatest icons of American Islam, a leading advocate of black empowerment, a powerful orator, a tireless, uncompromising warrior against racial injustice and discrimination, a successful leader and organizer, an inspiring role model for the youth as well as others. He is remembered for his fearless and uncompromising stance against racial injustice, an eloquent articulation of the struggles faced by the African Americans and the oppressed people all over the world, not just African Americans, but also for the oppressed all over the world. He is a true inspiration, a true role model, and a motivator. His leadership in the nation of Islam and his evolution towards a more inclusive vision in the latter part of his life, because his journey, long trajectory, and very milestones. And first, of course, I am going to review briefly his journey, inshallah, life journey. And then finally, his inclusive vision in the latter part of his life, as he embraced the true Islam, the Sunni Islam, the mainstream Islam, and his lasting contributions on the civil rights movement and beyond, and human rights and things like that. Following his embrace of the Sunni Islam and his exemplary moral courage and articulation of the positive, unifying message of Islam, he inspired many leaders, including Muhammad Ali, Abdul Karim Jabbar, and many others. And he still continues to inspire others. Many still embrace Islam after reading his autobiography and reading about his contributions, listening to his speeches and things like that. So he is a true inspiration for all of us. Malcolm X, whose original name was Malcolm Little, was born in Omaha, Nebraska. He was the fourth of 7 children of Earl Little and Louise Helen Little, Earl Little Malcolm X's father was an outspoken Baptist minister and a supporter of the Pan African leader, Marcus Garvey. He was His father was a civil rights activist who fought against racial injustice and advocated for the rights of African Americans. His mother, Louise Helen Little Malcolm, was a homemaker who played a significant role in her children's upbringing. She supported her husband's activism and instilled in her children a sense of pride in their African heritage. Malcolm and his siblings were born and brought up in a tumultuous milieu of rampant racism and discrimination at the hands of the white supremacists. In his early years, his family moved several times because of the persecution and oppression, harassment, continuous harassment of the racists. He moved from the place of his birth, Omaha, Nebraska, after being threatened by the Ku Klux Klan, who believed that white people are superior to all other races. While living in of course, he moved to Michigan, where it was an all-white neighborhood. They burned down his house. Malcolm was 6 years old when his father was mysteriously murdered. His mangled body was found on the railway tracks. The family and the black community were convinced that the white racists had committed the crime, although they claimed it was an accident. He committed suicide. Three of Malcolm's four uncles were also murdered by the super white racists. For a period of time, Malcolm's mother and the 8 children lived on public welfare. The trauma was unbearable for the single mother, and she was declared mentally ill and sent to a mental asylum where she would stay for about 20 years until Malcolm would and his brothers would bring her home. Malcolm and his children were divided among several families. For years, he lived in various state institutions and boarding houses. He was a very intelligent, precocious boy who excelled in his studies at school, and he was even recognized as a leader of the group. He was extremely ambitious and had great dreams and aspirations. However, he faced racism and discrimination within the school system, whereby he felt being marginalized and ignored by teachers who had very low expectations for the black students. Malcolm recounted an experience in his autobiography, it's called Autobiography of Malcolm X, where he mentions that his English teacher discouraged him from pursuing his ambition of becoming a lawyer. His dream was to be a lawyer. The teacher asked him what he wanted to become. He expressed his desire to become a lawyer. Of course, he was inspired by his father, who was a civil rights activist and a supporter of Marcus Garvey's Back to African movement. Ironically, instead of encouraging the student, his teacher responded by telling him that such a career goal was unrealistic and out of reach for a black person like him, and she suggested instead he should consider a manual career like being a carpenter because he thought he's not would not be fit for an intellectual career or a professional career, but carpentry is a profession that would befit him as an African American or a black person. This encounter with his teacher affected Malcolm X, and of course, he became disillusioned with the educational system altogether, and he decided to drop out of school. He was in eighth grade when he dropped out of school. After that, his life took a different direction. He gradually drifted into life of crime. He would be doing odd jobs here and there. He was living with his elder sister, who really encouraged him, but he drifted towards crime and involved in various illegal activities. And in 1946, at the age of 20, he was arrested for burglary and sentenced to 10 years in prison. While in prison, Malcolm underwent a significant transformation. Actually, you have the story of Prophet Yusuf alayhi salam. You have story of many, many great people, scholars and intellectuals in Islam. Jail becomes for them a Jannah. This was the case with Ibn Taymiyyah. He was in dungeon, and yet he said, "This is my heaven, this is my paradise, where I can commune with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I am all alone with the all alone." And he said, "I would not part with this blissful experience for the treasure of the whole world." And you have scholars who would produce encyclopedic compendium of fiqh, Hanafi fiqh, as it happened to one of the greatest Hanafi scholars. He wrote it, he dictated it from a well, dark well, where he was confined. So, in the case of Malcolm, prison became a great university for him. He used a lot of time, free time, to educate himself, voraciously reading books, from the prison library. He became interested in all sorts of topics. Widest education possible. Is a very cultured, thaqafa wasia, related to history, philosophy, religion, politics, psychology, sociology, and literature. He read extensively. And he also took online courses and practiced creative writing. He honed his literary skills by copying and memorizing the entire dictionary from A to Z. So here is a person, prison became a university for him. He met, it was in jail. Another factor for his transformation was he met fellow inmates who were members of the Nation of Islam, of Elijah Muhammad. These inmates, especially his brother Reginald, introduced him to the teachings of Elijah Muhammad, the leader of the Nation of Islam. And Malcolm's exposure to the Nation of Islam was a transformative experience that profoundly influenced the trajectory of his life. The message resonated deeply with Malcolm as it offered a sense of pride, identity, and empowerment to African Americans who had long suffered from racial discrimination and oppression. The Nation of Islam emphasized self reliance, economic independence, and the establishment of a separate black nation. That was the motto of the Nation of Islam. Its teachings promoted the idea of black superiority. So, white superiority versus black superiority is reacting and the rejection of white society and its influence and as inherently oppressive. In 1952, Malcolm was released from prison on parole for serving after serving 6 years in jail. Soon after, he became a devoted follower of Elijah Muhammad, embraced Islam, and changed his surname to X. Malcolm Little, he changed it to Malcolm X, symbolizing the rejection of his slave surname, as he didn't know his original African, the name that he came with. And in 1957, he became a minister of the Nation of Islam and national spokesman for the Nation of Islam. In this capacity, he gained widespread attention because he was very articulate, very passionate advocate for black separatism at the time, self-defense, all of this ideology, rejection of white supremacy and influence. He rose through the ranks of the Nation of Islam to become its most prominent leader at the time and a dynamic spokesperson for the movement. He used his remarkable oratory skills to captivate his audiences to spread the message. His speeches were powerful, eloquent, and often provocative, earning him a reputation as one of the most captivating public speakers of all time. He attracted thousands of new followers and expanded the reach of the movement. Under his leadership, Malcolm X established hundreds of new mosques and temples across the United States, particularly in urban centers with large African American populations. This new institution served as hubs for community organizing, religious worship, and social activism within the black community. Malcolm possessed a charismatic and magnetic personality because of which he could draw many people to the Nation of Islam. Under his leadership, Nation of Islam experienced significant growth and expansion. He recruited new members, organized events, and set up institutions across the United States. He was adept at using the media. Media was the power, according to him. He used it effectively to spread the message and raise awareness of his teachings. He gave interviews, appeared on television radio programs, and wrote extensively articles for newspapers and magazines, thus increasing the visibility and the influence of the Nation of Islam. His contributions helped to articulate and popularize the key beliefs of the movement, including black nationalism, self defense, and the rejection of white supremacy. So, his transformation from a troubled youth to a respected leader within the Nation of Islam inspired many people both within and outside the organization. A journey of self discovery and spiritual awakening resonated with countless individuals who were searching for meaning and purpose in their own lives. Of course, his transformation would not stop there. A second transformation. In 1963, Malcolm became disillusioned with the Nation of Islam after learning of Elijah Muhammad's extramarital affairs. They said he fathered many children out of wedlock and also his financial misconduct. Soon after leaving the organization, he formed his own religious organization called the Muslim Mosque Incorporated. And in 1964, he made embark on his momentous journey, pilgrimage to Mecca, which was the greatest milestone in his life. His experience of Hajj was the greatest transformative was the greatest transformative experience in his life. It affected a complete ideological shift in his thinking. Prior to that, he was a black supremacist versus white supremacist. But Islam does not allow. There is no room for racism in Islam, whether white or black, red or yellow. He embraced the Sunni Islam and renounced the racial separatism he previously advocated. He also changed his name to Al Hajj Malik Shabazz. You know, in our discussion session on Malik Badri, we said he met Malik Badri in Sudan. And of course, that was perhaps the reason that because he loved Malik Badri, he chose his name. And as we can read from the works and the lectures of Malik Badri. So Al Hajj Malik Shabazz. In 1964, he founded the Organization of Africa Afro American Unity because he considered them as the oppressed people. Of course, he had that empathy for the oppressed people all over the world, and the purpose was to promote unity among African Americans and fight for their rights through non-violent means. In January 1965, he visited Toronto. Actually, he prayed in the first mosque we had at the time, in Dundas, which later would be moved to that Presbyterian church on Dundas, Boston Avenue, Jami Mosque, where I served as an imam for 2 terms, for over 10 years actually. So he visited Toronto, and of course he visited the masjid there, and okay, uh, met with the leaders of the Muslim community. He took part in several speaking engagements and on public events in Toronto, advocating the black empowerment, self-determination, and the fight against racial oppression. His message resonated with many Canadians, particularly members of the black community who face similar challenges of discrimination and marginalization. The highlights of his visits to Toronto was his appearance on the CBC television program Front Page Challenge, which was very, very popular show, radio show at the time. It was aired on January 1965. It was a legendary interview conducted by the panelists Pierre Bertrand, Robert Penwarren, and Gordon Sinclair, very, very famous journalists. It became renowned for its depth and insight into Malcolm's beliefs and thoughts, particularly regarding race relations and his break from the Nation of Islam. All these issues were discussed in that interview. It exhibited his character's eloquence, intelligence, and passion. He spoke candidly about his experiences in the Nation of Islam and his estrangement, disillusion with the leadership of Elijah Muhammad, and his progressive understanding of racial dynamics in the United States. This interview captured attention of audiences across North America and solidified his reputation as a thought provoking intellectual leader. And his words challenged the conventional wisdom and influenced conversations about race, identity, and social change. Within weeks after his return to the United States, less than a month, on February 21st, 1965, he was assassinated while delivering a speech at the Audubon Ballroom in Harlem, New York City. He was shot multiple times, allegedly by 3 members of the Nation of Islam. However, the exact motives, identity of the assassins, and details remain a mystery. Many say FBI was involved in it. It was framed. Now, coming to the thought and the intellectual spiritual transformation, some of the factors we discussed before. Now, coming to the specific Islamic sources of the inspiration, beside Hajj, we already alluded to Hajj, the Quran and the teachings of Islam played a critical role in Malcolm's personal transformation and worldview. Malcolm diligently observed daily prayers and he found solace and comfort and guidance in the recitation of Quranic verses. He often spoke about the importance of prayer and reflection in connecting with God and seeking spiritual enlightenment. He was deeply spiritual person. He experienced the Quran as a source of wisdom, guidance, and moral principles. And the Quran for him answered, provided satisfactory, convincing answers to the fundamental questions of human existence which every human being must address to find peace and meaning in life. He was moved by the Quranic emphasis on justice, equality, and compassion, and he frequently referred quoted Quranic verses in his speeches and the articles he wrote, the interviews he gave. He saw the incredible unifying power of the message of the Quran, which teaches us, Ya ayyuhan nas, inna khalaqnakum min dhakarin wa untha, وَجَعَلْنَاكُمْ شُعُوبًا وَقَبَائِلَ لِتَعَارَفُوا. O mankind, we created you from a single pair of male and female and rendered you into nations and tribes in order for you to recognize each other, not to fight, but to recognize, know, get to know one another. Inna akramakum indallahi atqakum, verily the noblest of you in the sight of Allah are those who are most conscious of Him. So there is no room in Islam for saying that black is superior to the white or white is superior to black, because Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam explained it in his sermon, final sermon. Ya ayyuhan nas, O mankind, لا فضل لعربي على عجمي ولا عجمي على عربي ولا لأبيض ولا على أسود ولا لأسود ولا أبيض كلكم من آدم وآدم من تراب. There is no reason for an Arab to claim superiority over a non-Arab, or for a non-Arab to claim superiority over an Arab, or for a white person to claim superiority over a black person, or for a white black person to claim superiority over a white person. Kullukum min Adam, every one of you is descended from Adam, wa Adamu min turab. Adam is created from the earth. And we are from the earth, and we should go back to the earth, and from the earth once again we will be resurrected. So Malcolm X discovered the true liberating, unifying message of the Quran that considers the entire human family as one. So this was a powerful unifying message. Actually, in his letter from Mecca, he wrote to his friends in America, that he have discovered a formula whereby we can finish all these racial tensions and conflicts in America and the world if we heed the message of the Quran, which unifies, which breaks down the warriors and the wars that separate us from one another and bridge the gap and create that unity and brotherhood. based on the sacred bond of humanity. Another great influence on Malcolm X's thinking was the Prophet of Islam. Of course, we have the Quran and we have the Prophet of Islam as an exemplar, as a role model that we can look up to. He deeply appreciated the Prophet Muhammad as a model of moral integrity, leadership, and social justice. It is said that Malcolm was a person of integrity and trustworthy, all those qualities, the basic moral virtues and traits that human beings consider perennially in all religions, in all moral codes. There are basic traits, moral virtues, and according to Malcolm X, Prophet Muhammad exemplified them all. So, moral integrity, leadership, and social justice. He admired the exemplary character and conduct as a true manifestation of the highest moral and ethical standards. لقد كان لكم في رسول الله أسوة حسنة. You have indeed a beautiful exemplar in the Messenger of Allah for those of you who look up to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on the last day and remember Allah much. Malcolm X praised the Prophet's honesty, compassion, humility, and his dedication to serving others. This was the qualities to be emulated by all Muslims. Malcolm X considered Prophet Muhammad as a messenger of peace. Where there is violence and tensions and conflicts, he considered the Prophet as a messenger of peace, not messenger of violence. Actually, he advocated by any means, even violence, he tolerated to achieve. But later he realized we should adopt the path of peace and justice. Rasulullah championed the rights of the oppressed and marginalized. This was a very inspiring model for him in Rasulullah. He highlighted the Prophet's teachings on social equality, human rights, and the importance of standing up against injustice as timeless principles that remain relevant to contemporary struggles for civil rights and liberation. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is the one who said, "Afdalul jihadi kalimatu haqqin in the Sultan Jair." The supreme act of jihad is to speak the truth before a tyrannical ruler, truth to the power, speaking truth to the power. This is what Malcolm X embodied in his life. Malcolm admired the Prophet's courage, resilience, and commitment to transforming society through peaceful resistance and non-violent protest. The lives and teachings of Prophet Muhammad served as a source of inspiration for Malcolm X for his activism, advocacy for civil rights and social justice. He saw Rasulullah's example as a guide for Muslims to engage in righteous action, to work towards creating a better, more just and compassionate society. Beautiful. Malcolm's message to the American people underwent a significant transformation after his Hajj. He returned from Mecca with a broader perspective on Islam and a more inclusive vision of humanity. For him now, there is no room for dividing humanity into black and white or red and yellow, creating this kind of racial or ethnic relationship barriers and walls. But humanity is one family, one brotherhood. So we should work for unity. We should work for common humanity, dignity for everyone. He saw His experience of seeing Muslims of diverse ethnicities worshipping together, eating together, talking together, mixing with each other, challenged the racial walls that were prevalent in the American society. It's a wonderful experience he wrote to his fellow Americans. So he was forced to renounce his previous advocacy for racial separatism and embrace a more inclusive approach to social justice, advocating for solidarity and cooperation in the struggle against racism and oppression. Definitely spoke against racism and prejudice, urging Americans to confront the systematic injustices that perpetuated racial discrimination and inequality. He called for a fundamental re-evaluation of social norms and institutions to address the root cause of racial injustice. Hajj was so deeply a personal journey of spiritual transformation for Malcolm X. He also encouraged the individuals to seek enlightenment and self improvement through introspection, education, and a commitment to moral and ethical principles. And he saw Islam as one of the most powerful forces for social change and the betterment of human condition. Now, of course, we can talk and talk and talk a lot about this great icon of American Islam, great mender and leader and organizer and thinker and reformer and wise a sage actually. Now let us see some of the testimonials. Of course, there are hundreds of them. I picked some. I picked Martin Luther King Jr. Ideologically, they differed actually, but yet this great leader of African from activism, a civil rights activist, leader of civil rights movement in America, even though he differed with the approach of Malcolm X, of course, especially when he was in the Nation of Islam, yet he appreciated. He wrote to his, when after the assassination of Malcolm X, he wrote to the widow of Malcolm X, while we did not always see eye to eye on methods to solve the race problem, I always had a deep affection for Malcolm and felt that he had a great ability to put his finger on the existence and root of the problem. It's highly important testimony. Nelson Mandela, the former South African president and the apartheid leader, also praised Malcolm X's commitment to justice and equality. He said Malcolm X was one of the greatest African Americans that we have produced. He spoke out uncompromisingly against racism. He gave expression to the pent up feelings of millions of oppressed people all over the world, not just Africans, for the oppressed wherever they may be. He gave expression to the feelings of the millions and spoke against oppression and tyranny and injustice. Cornel West, professor, scholar, and academic and activist. Malcolm X is a towering, inspirational figure for all those concerned about civil rights, freedom, and the quest for human dignity. His revolutionary spirit and passionate commitment to justice continue to serve as a beacon of hope for oppressed people everywhere. It's indeed a great testimony. It's a towering, inspirational, revolutionary spirit, passionate commitment. Is a beacon of hope for the oppressed all over the world. Dr. Yusuf Qaradawi, now coming back, of course, King Faisal and many others have praised him tremendously. We cannot select all of them. Yusuf Qaradawi, we had a session on him 2 weeks ago. Prominent Islamic scholar, jurist, and reformer, and thinker, and mujaddid. He said Malcolm X was a visionary leader who understood the importance of Islam in the struggle against oppression and injustice. His legacy serves as a reminder of the power of faith in the fight for liberation. There are many who would like to confine Islam to a passive. They oppose activism. They oppose resistance. They want us to acquiesce in the bear the oppression and injustice patiently because it's the will of Allah. This is a distortion. This is killing the true spirit, the meaning of liberation enshrined in Tawheed. So, Qaradawi is indeed recognizing Malcolm X as a person who experienced this liberating vision of Islam and put it into practice. So his legacy serves as a reminder of the power of faith in the fight for freedom and liberation, and freedom of oppression and justice. This is what we see, the power of this great faith as we see our brothers and sisters in Gaza and Palestine braving. They are burned, they are maimed, they are tortured left and right, their houses bulldozed, everything destroyed, and yet they are steadfast. They keep on resisting. This is the real Islam, the spirit of Islam, the liberating power of Tawheed. Muhammad Ali, who was a close friend, of course, it's a mistake there. Muhammad Ali, of course, we all know Muhammad Ali was a close friend and admirer of Malcolm X, spoke highly of his impact on the Muslim world. He said, Malcolm X was a hero to millions of Muslims around the world. His courage, integrity, and commitment to Islam continue to inspire us all. Sheikh Ahmad Didat, the South African Islamic scholar and preacher, Da'iyah, said of Malcolm X was a courageous leader who fearlessly defended Islam and the rights of Muslims and the oppressed all over the world. His legacy continues to inspire us in our efforts to promote understanding and tolerance. Now, let us have a taste of the great wisdom. Of course, there are a lot of quotations. You can search for it in Google and you should read them. I have picked a few of them to have a taste of the thought, the depth of the experience, the how this man, what was his thought, what was the idea, what was his motivation, what made him what he became. Said you cannot separate peace from freedom because no one can be at peace unless he has his freedom. You see the importance of freedom for the Gazans, Palestinians. They want us to make peace with Israel. How can there be peace when they are denied their freedom? So that's what he's saying. You cannot separate peace from freedom. Because how can there be peace when there is no freedom? So how can you make peace? A man who stands for nothing will fall for anything. It's a great. A man who stands for nothing will fall for anything. Great. Think deeply about this. So we must all ask ourselves, what am I standing for? What is the niche I am filling in this world? What's my role in this world to make it a better place, a place where everybody enjoys freedom and dignity and rights that God has bestowed on them. We declare our right on this earth to be a man, to be a human being, to be respected as a human being, to be given the rights of a human being in this society, on this earth, in this day, which we intend to bring into existence by any means necessary. So we should struggle for that. We should resist. We should stand up against oppression and tyranny because we have a right to exist on this earth, to be free, to be respected. وَلَقَدْ كَرَّمْنَا بَنِي Adam. We have honored the children of Adam. So every human being has a right to exist, to enjoy dignity and freedom and the rights that God has bestowed on them. The media, this is very, media is the most powerful entity on earth. They have the power to make the innocent guilty and to make the guilty innocent, and that is power because they control the minds of the masses. So, what do we learn from this? We cannot underestimate the power of the media. They can brainwash us, and they are doing so. As they project Israel as a beacon of democracy, which is not. It's a fake democracy. It's a democracy which denies the rights of an entire millions of Palestinians who are the original inhabitants of the land. Most of these leaders of Israel, they are from Europe. They were not born there. They usurped, they occupied, they took over, they bulldozed. So, but the media projects them as the enlightened, as the Democrats. So they have a right because the others are simply against democracy. They are backward, they are illiterate, barbarians. So we have to be careful. We cannot trust the media. We have to judge. We have to read between the lines. We have to seek the truth. I am for truth, no matter who tells it. And I am for justice, no matter who it is for or against. So this is what we see now. Look at the youth protesting because they see the oppression, the genocide, the discrimination, the rampant injustice, denial of rights, apartheid. So they are protesting because they know the truth and law. So they are for justice. Many of them are not even Muslims, many of them even Jews. So we cannot blame all the Jews. Zionism is different from Judaism. We need more light about each other. This is another wisdom he has, of course, because he freed himself from that narrow mindedness, racist mindset. He's calling for us to understand each other. This is the Quranic message for us. We created you from a single pair of a male and female and rendered you into nations tribe for you to recognize each other, to know each other, to understand each other. So we need to understand each other. When we understand each other, that understanding will create love. Love creates patience, and patience creates unity. I remember mentioning that great, quotation from Ibn Rushd, one of the great philosophers of Islam, Muslim philosophers, who said, ignorance breeds hate, and hate leads to violence, and violence breeds to war. That is the uh, equation. So, ignorance must be dispelled through education. And then this hatred, because we hate what we don't know. This is what human nature. So we need to understand, and we understand each other. It creates love, and we stop hating each other. And when we do so, we pave the way for peace in the world. You are not supposed to be so blind with patriotism that you cannot face reality. This is what nationalism makes us blind, because my country, right or wrong. This was Jahiliyyah. They used to say, my tribe, right and wrong, or wrong. I will be with my tribe. If they wage war, I wage war. No question asked whether this was right or wrong. No. Rush to take up arms. So, tribalism, this is the modern tribalism. When you blindly follow, you are a blind patriot, citizen. When the government, the leaders call for war, you blindly follow them. No, wrong is wrong, no matter and who does it or says it. Power in defense of freedom is greater than power on behalf of tyranny and oppression. Education, very, very important quotation. Education is our passport to the future. For tomorrow belongs to the people who prepare for it today. This is one of the greatest lessons that Islam taught us, because Islam is all about knowledge. We have the Quran, Iqra, the order to read, and the use of pen, stress before the order by Allah to worship. And that is why the entire Islamic civilization, one thing that characterizes it, according to even Western historians, there is a book there by Rosendahl, is Knowledge Triumphant, because he studies the history of knowledge in Islam, and he says this is one civilization that has the motto is knowledge. So this civilization is created. Source of inspiration is the Quran, the order to read. So education is our passport to the future. Tomorrow belongs to the people who prepare for it today. Without education, you are not going anywhere in this world. This is a lesson for every Muslim, every human being. The future belongs to those who prepare for it today. My alma mater was books, a good library. I could spend the rest of my life reading, just satisfying my curiosity. Nobody can give you freedom. Nobody can give you equality or justice or anything. You have to ask for it. You have to demand it. You have to take it. Stand for your right. Otherwise, you will be trodden by under the feet of others. You cannot legislate goodwill. That comes from education. I am not a racist. I am against every human form of racism and segregation, every form of discrimination. I believe in human beings, that all human beings should be respected as such, regardless of their color, race, or ethnicity. You are not to be so blind with patriotism that you cannot face reality. Wrong is wrong, we have mentioned it. Don't be in a hurry to condemn because he does not do what you do. Don't condemn because people don't do what you do or think as you think. There was a time when you didn't know what you know today. Meaning, our duty is to educate the other person who look at the issue differently. You yourself know how your thought has progressed, how you have become free from those shackles of racism and enjoying true freedom and liberation and belief in dignity as a human being, as a Khalifa, steward of the earth, under the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. With this, I conclude. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala shower His mercy and blessings and mercy and forgiveness on our brother Markham Al Malik Shabazz. He was indeed a true visionary, an inspiring role model, an icon of American Islam that all of us could look to and benefit from his thought and his works. I urge everyone to do so. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless us all uh, to enjoy, to benefit from our great leaders and visionaries. I would remind everyone we will take a 2 weeks break and we will come back on the 26th of May, inshallah, to study another great scholar and sage from India. His name is Ashraf Ali Thanavi. I would urge you all to join me as we come back on May 26th, inshallah. Until then, let's enjoy. I have some other commitment, that's why we have to take this break. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala have mercy on all of us. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليكم.